Chapter 65. The ship's fusion engines came to life with a vibration that rattled his bones. Oakes sank back into his couch as the multi-G acceleration hit the Marines full bore. He switched to block communication only, speech being nearly impossible with his mouth open and cheeks stretched backwards.
"Oakes to Dunn,"
he said over the block.
"Go ahead." "Sir, first acceleration burn will be complete in another 30 seconds. "Understood,"
Dunn said.
"Keep me apprised." "Aye, sir."
Apprised. What a strange word to use. Dunn should have said, "Let me know if we're about to blow up." Shit. The captain could see the reports himself in real time. Why did he want to be apprised? Oakes flipped to Black's rear camera feed. As soon as the munitions had reached Mira and left her in shattered pieces, he'd fired up the maneuvering engines and changed their course to face Pluto. When the creatures, no longer in possession of their home, flooded outward like a hungry wave of darkness, he'd punched the engines to provide a full burn. The ship roared through space, slowly picking up speed as the fusion engines belched excited gas and heat in flares of energy, but that didn't mean they were leaving the creatures behind. No, sir. That tidal wave of flailing limbs, pulsing carapaces, and acid-spitting creatures formed up behind them like a plague. It shot forward toward the ship, or maybe toward the beacon, at a speed he didn't think possible. Mira had still been traveling at a good clip on a course for Pluto. That meant the creatures had started out at that speed, as had S&R Black. But accelerating from that speed took power, and a lot of it, at least for something of S&R Black's size. The creatures, on the other hand, appeared to have greater speed than he'd considered possible. Not to mention, they had a lot less mass to move. But that wasn't all, was it? The tsunami wave of exosolar life forms had collapsed upon itself like a black hole. A misshapen sphere of alien malevolence, alien hunger, followed the ship no more than half a kilometer behind. The worst part? Oakes wasn't making the lead he thought he would. Instead, the creatures seemed to be accelerating faster than S&R Black. But that wouldn't last. How could it? Not for the first time, he wondered where these things came from. And more importantly, was there a goal? An endgame for them? Was the beacon something they were protecting, or just following because it flashed them with light? Maybe some signal human technology couldn't detect. And why did the trio really want them to plant the beacon on Pluto? Too many questions, he thought. Also, he needed to focus on the burn. Another 10 seconds and they reached cruising speed. He'd have to bump it a few more times in the next hour so they could catch Dickerson. He sincerely hoped he wouldn't have to slow down too much. Otherwise, the creatures might catch up. He didn't want to think about what they'd do to the ship if they did manage to overtake her. The acceleration burn came to an end, the pressure on his spine quickly decreasing. A few seconds later, he was able to lean forward again, crack his back, and get back to the controls. "Attention crew," he said. "First burn is finished. Next burn is scheduled for 20 minutes from now."
"Thank you,"
Dunn said.
"Keep her steady, and find that escape pod. I want Dickerson back on board as soon as possible."
"Aye, sir," Oakes said. He wiped a sheen of sweat from his brow. He thought of everything he'd seen over the past several hours, a span of time that felt more like eons rather than hundreds of minutes. They were on the precipice of getting the fuck out of the deep Kuiper Belt and away from this madness. Weren't they? Dunn stared at the hollow displays, a look of both wonder and worry etched upon his already well-lined face. Talby and his squad, Dunn corrected himself, were still in the cargo bay. The Marines were probably rehydrating, refueling their suits, and getting some chow. Maybe even some sleep. Sleep was sometimes the most difficult provision to procure. SFMC personnel on quote-unquote real duty learned to sleep standing up, maglock the bulkheads or the deck, and were trained to snap into action at a single comm command. Considering how battered Calimora and Carbonaro were, he hoped for their sake they were getting some Z's. As for Talby himself, no telling. Dunn could have peeked at the cargo bay feed, but felt no need. It was Talby's squad, his people. Well, they were all Dunn's people, certainly, but Talby was their direct commander. Even more so now that Gunny was incapacitated.
"Sir?"
Talby's voice broke across block comms.
"Go ahead." "I have a proposition, sir. Since we don't know how long Gunny will be out, I suggest Corporal Calimora take over his position for now.
Dunn raised an eyebrow. He hadn't even considered that Talby needed someone to coordinate the fire teams if they had to deploy all the Marines.
Is she well enough?
Talby paused.
I think so, sir. I'll ask, of course, but I wanted to get your opinion.
Dunn leaned back in his couch, a gentle smile on his face.
She went into hell with 3 Marines, came back with 2, and we're going to pick up the 3rd. I'd say she's got the backbone for it, and I think it's an excellent decision.
When Talby spoke again, Dunn could hear the man nodding in agreement.
That's what I thought you'd say, sir. How are the Marines?
Talby managed a brief laugh, but through the block it was more of a feeling than a sound.
Tired as they should be. I've got them resting as best I can, but a couple of the holdouts are still studying cam feeds.
Dunn shook his head.
For what? Something we can learn, sir. Anything, really. Okay, another burn in 19 minutes. Be ready. Aye, sir. Talby out.
Dunn connected to Black.
Yes, Captain.
The AI had been unusually silent since Talby had destroyed Mira. He'd expected her to assail him with useless information, but instead, she'd merely described the hits and the damage done to the giant ship's hull. He thought that strange. What do you make of their pursuit? The AI requested a block connection. Sighing, Dunn accepted it. The world around him, the hollow displays, the bridge, everything disappeared, leaving him in darkness and facing a perfect sphere pulsing in a myriad of colors.
I see we've gone for comfort again,
he told the AI. The shape turned a dull red, the AI equivalent of a blush.
Sorry, sir. Sometimes it's best to go with what works.
You have something to show me?
Yes, Captain.
The shape disappeared, leaving the world clothed in darkness. A single pine cone creature faded into the foreground. Behind it, several other life forms appeared. Starfish, those monstrous bird things, and a few he didn't even recognize. Each looked like a conglomeration of insect, mammal, bird, and aquatic animals to him. It was as if Earth's once lustrous fauna, now virtually extinct, had headed out into space in an orgy of impossible reproduction and evolution. The pine cone's silvery claw poked out of its sheath, the suicidally sharp appendage glinting in unseen ambient light. The starfish moved forward, its large body and arms facing him like a creature from a horror hollow. Its maw opened and closed, displaying serrated teeth and a pair of strong mandibles guarding the orifice.
The creatures you see here,
Black said,
are the original pair described in Mira's data dump. However, the other creatures you see behind them are the new arrivals. Notice the similarities and the differences.
Dunn did. They were easy to spot. The pinecone creature had no visible means of locomotion. Black had previously theorized that perhaps they excreted gas as propulsion. That seemed borne out by some of Calimora's feed records. The starfish, on the other hand, moved with a grace he thought only possible in an atmosphere, or with a set of thrusters. While the starfish moved by pulling in its arms and shooting them backward like a swimmer plowing through water, the new arrivals had new appendages, including what looked like a solar sail.
Black, that's sail?
Yes, Captain. I believe it to be a photosensitive organ capable of drawing energy from stray photons.
But it's moving way too fast to only be powered by the push of photons.
Very true,
Black said.
I believe there is another explanation for this, although it's at present beyond my understanding. As I've said before, the only way to truly understand these creatures would be to capture one and study it.
Not going to happen,
Dunn said.
No,
Black agreed.
They have proved themselves far too dangerous to attempt such an endeavor.
So what are you telling me about these creatures?
The universe split again as the creatures lined up against one another, frozen in time, frozen in space. The pine cones were by far the smallest of the group. The starfish were next in size, followed by the new arrivals. The creatures with the sails were the largest of the lot, and even more horrible to gaze upon than the starfish. The limbs, appendages, and mouths disappeared from each of the images, leaving the carapaces in place. Dunn frowned. They slowly spun in tandem, giving him a more or less complete comparison, front to back.
Do you see the similarities?
Black asked, her spherical avatar floating in the far upper left corner of the simulation. He did, but didn't know what to make of it. Each of the shells had a dark, wavy appearance as if they had some effect on the surrounding light, but at the same time, the pine cones had a much tougher shell, as though they were more protected or made of a different material. The pine cones were also the only ones without long appendages of some sort.
Can you put them in order?
Black paused.
By how we discovered them? By size?
By size,
Dunn said. The images slid by one another until they were arranged from smallest to largest. 7 different types of alien life. 7 different average sizes. Yet they all had the same attributes apart from the pine cones.
Are the pine cones eggs?
That is a good question.
Black said.
After studying their behavior from Corporal Kelly Moore's cam recordings, I don't think they are. Although they seem to be the least predatory of the varied species and demonstrate herd behavior techniques when threatened, they have also demonstrated a certain level of intelligence far beyond what I would expect.
Meaning what exactly?
Dunn asked.
So what if the small ones are as smart as the big ones?
The equivalent of a sigh filled his mind.
At the base layer of Earth's old ecology, the simple-celled organisms sitting at the bottom of the food chain were not capable of thought. Reflexes, yes. Some sort of instinctual intelligence? Impossible to say. So let's go larger, shall we? The largest organism in the ocean, before the wars of the 21st century, was a type of whale. Although it was the largest creature on Earth at the time, its premier food source was an organism called plankton. Many creatures in the ocean ate plankton, but my point is that size isn't important for consumption.
Okay,
Dunn said, still confused.
I'm not following you, Black.
The limbs, appendages, mandibles, and mouths reappeared on the creatures. They looked like insects drawn from a child's nightmare. All of them, apart from the pine cone, disappeared. An image of a new creature appeared, only it didn't look the same at all. Compared to the pine cone, its shell appeared lustrous and bright, although it was technically black. Its segmented body seemed as though it could stretch and bend, but the most striking difference were the legs. The new creature had what seemed like hundreds of legs.
Wow,
Dunn said.
Is that from Earth?
Yes.
Black said.
Notice the similarities?
I do,
Dunn said.
You think these creatures, the ones we've seen thus far, are just the base of the food chain?
It's possible,
Black said.
Their adaptations to life in ZG as well as a vacuum are startling. By today's models of evolution, one might say they're even impossible. But there they are.
Then what the hell is that beacon?
Dunn asked. Black paused again. The AI seemed as though it was mulling over which of its many different theories it wished to pursue. That was never a good sign.
The beacon,
Black said,
is most likely one of 3 things. An attractor to repopulate portions of space, the first step in an alien invasion, or something we haven't even considered.
Dunn rolled his eyes.
What does that even mean?
If I knew,
Black said dryly,
I would have considered it.
Fair enough,
Dunn said.
What do your simulations tell you?
Black said nothing for a moment, but the Earth insect disappeared. The pine cone zoomed out slightly and the rest of its alien brethren reappeared.
Simulations are inconclusive at best, Captain. The trio had a reason for sending it to Pluto.
Yes,
Dunn said.
To make sure it didn't travel.
That is likely. However,
Black said,
there may be a different reason they didn't want it to travel.
What are you saying, Black?
Then my creators might know the real reason it's here.
Dunn shivered. The videos, the communications piped to them, the files decrypting for Black as events unfolded. Were there thousands of those files? The answers for certain situations they foresaw? Or did they calculate the most likely events and plan for them? They were the 3 most powerful AIs in Sol System, designed on Xi's principles and the most expensive technology of their time, and they had been retrofitted and serviced, unlike the rest of Trident Station and the Neptune shipyards. While replacement parts for the trio internals were always on time and abundant, just getting raw materials to print new components for the SFMC was a hassle. All the trio had to do was think, and they'd had 43 years to do that based on the information gathered by Mira's crew and AI. Almost half a century of poring over data transmitted by Mira's AI before it became homicidal.
Before the accident,
Dunn said.
What do you mean, sir?
Dunn pursed his lips. He didn't even want to think about this. Not when the trio had control of the station, not when the AIs had control over the base he hoped to return to.
Black, I'm going out on a limb here, and I'm going to trust you.
Thank you, Captain. Trust me with what?
He flexed his fingers, desperately trying to force himself to speak.
What if the trio planned everything, including the accident aboard Mira?
Black was silent for a moment. The creatures disappeared and a picture of Mira filled the void. It was Mira as she had looked before leaving Trident Station and Sol System on her supposed mission. The ship was still majestic, still elegant for its size and shape, still a monument to humanity's efforts to ensure their future. Now, it was little more than millions of hunks of Atmos steel floating through the Kuiper Belt. Any evidence of its journey was lost forever, save for the creatures it had brought back with it. Well, those and the beacon.
Captain,
Black said.
Are you implying the trio realized the danger of the beacon once Mira's crew brought it on board? Or they knew even before the crew retrieved it?
I don't know if it was before or after, but I think they knew before the reactors went critical.
Black paused again. He could practically hear her making a sound.
Possible,
Black said.
I have run similar simulations.
Dunn cocked his head.
You have?
Black seemed to chuckle.
Captain, the last few hours have been an eternity for me. Even while running Oakes's and Noble's calculations, monitoring the Marines, and handling my usual duties, I've hardly been taxed. Ever since the first message from the trio, I have been curious as to their decisions as well as their intent.
The weapons,
Dunn said.
They were experimental, but they worked.
And the trio ensured those munitions were put aboard the ship. The likelihood of coincidence is nearly impossible. If the trio knew of the creatures, which it appears they did nothing to warn SFMC or SFGov about them. Or perhaps the reports were lost. Or,
Black said,
Colonel Hayes either knows and chose not to brief you, or his commanders did the same to him.
Again, possible. But that didn't make much sense to Dunn. If SFGov or SFMC had known about the threat, it would have been nearly impossible to keep it secret for the last 43 years. Secrets just didn't stay secret. They never did. Not for long, anyway.
Black, if the trio did know when they set this up, why did they do it? What could possibly be their reasoning?
Mira disappeared, replaced by a view of Trident Station and Neptune shipyards orbiting the strange-hued world. No ships were docked. It was a simulation, similar to the one the trio had used in their last few messages. Similar, but not the same.
I cannot say with any confidence what that endgame might be, Captain. I believe we'll have to return to Trident Station to discover the answer to that question.
Bullshit, he thought to himself. He felt Black's reluctance to voice her suspicions, which meant she had an idea but didn't want to share. In a way, he couldn't blame her. If she saw something malevolent, she didn't want to share it because it would destroy any trust she had left with the crew. And if it wasn't, well, she wanted to be sure one way or another. So did Dunn.
Contact PEO. Tell them we're heading back. Also, ask Mickey if he has a fix on Dickerson.
Yes, Captain.
He broke the connection and was once again on the bridge. Oakes readjusted himself in his couch. The ship's cycling engines made the deck and bulkheads vibrate, a soothing sensation rather than what it did to you when you were under thrust. When you were under multi-G thrust, you felt as though every bone in your body was going to be pounded into dust. Dunn rubbed at his eyes. He wanted out of his combat suit. He wanted to sit in the galley, read, and drink coffee. And you can do all that, he told himself, the moment we're on our way home. He smiled to himself. He could almost taste the too often recycled air on Trident Station, imagine the feel of its deck beneath his slippered feet, and smell the odors of various vape flavors, the sour tang of beer, and the all-too-casual atmosphere of the officers' club. Just have to make it there, he told himself. You're assuming it's all still there, a voice inside his mind tittered. Dunn frowned. He knew a part of him wondered that very thing.